Today is September the 11th, 2025. 24 years since the 9/11 attacks or incident. It is the day after the great Charlie Kirk was gunned down in cold blood, assassinated on September the 10th in the afternoon at a political event. So just an update for you guys. Charlie Kirk's body has been taken to Arizona on Air Force Two and will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda at some point. One of the biggest things we need to take away from this horrendous tragedy, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is the glaring reality that we cannot coexist with these leftists who really are just communist revolutionaries. I mean, how much more violence are we supposed to take against white people, against conservatives, against populist nationalists, against Christians of every denomination, even libertarians? You know, Charlie Kirk, before he passed, days before he passed, I think maybe about a week or so, I believe, is where this tweet's from. He tweeted about the Ukrainian girls unaliving, and he said this. He said, if we want things to change, it's 100% necessary to politicize the senseless unaliving of Irina Zarustka, because it was politics that allowed a savage monster with 14 priors to be free on the streets to unalive her. And not only that, ladies and gentlemen, but as he has stated himself, I mean, the left has been advocating publicly for years for political violence. They have been indoctrinating generations of children at all levels of education into this violent, communist, revolutionary mindset. You know, people are going around saying that we should not react with violence, which is true. But when someone has declared total war against you and your people, your government, your family, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, and others in your community, what are we supposed to do? Many people say that we should not react in any way, lest we violate Christ's anti-violence tenets founded in the New Testament. In essence, even if it's military action on the streets, or if it is legal action that is done, policing action that is done, if it leads to violence, we should avoid it because it's against Christianity, you see. This is an incorrect interpretation of Christ's teaching when he says, turn the other cheek. Christ was specifically using an example of interpersonal relationships. It was a specific example of two people fighting, not a civil insurgency or an invading army. I still don't know how people ignorantly blow up a fight among two people and logically put it in the same category as an insurrection or two warring nation states. It's baffling. The words of Christ against violent reactions toward aggression is a social teaching, not a new law of anti-war. This is one reason why I'm no longer Protestant, because each denomination and independent church can have their own unique interpretation of the Holy Scriptures, whereas in traditional sacramental forms of Christianity, they have the tradition of the apostles to tell them what the Scriptures mean, so no one gets lost in the plot, and everybody stays right on point. In the history of Christianity, or Christendom, no one has ever advocated for the position that violence is inherently bad, even if it is justice brought upon those who are justly deserving of it. This would be tolerance of evil. It would be the tolerance of evil in the midst of your society, which as a Christian is forbidden. Tolerance is not a virtue of Christianity. Bringing about justice and driving out evil is preserving the most good for the most people, and thereby will give those people freer access to God so that they may freely access salvation unimpeded. That is what Christianity is supposed to bring to society, not tolerance of evil acts. So with that being said, what should our response be to this tragedy? In my last video, I answered what we should do individually, what we should do in our own households, what we should do with ourselves personally, but what government action should we demand be taken? What government action, I'll say it again, what government action should we demand to be taken against those who we know are responsible for Charlie Kirk's assassination? Well, I believe we should demand a law to be passed that says that people who are communists, even if they call themselves socialists or they go by any other name, they should be arrested or publicly unalived for rebellion against the United States. We will call this Kirk's Law in honor of Charlie Kirk. Let me read to you my proposed legislation. It would look something approximate to this. Those who believe that violence against their fellow citizens for not aligning with their communist beliefs is justified are themselves de facto enemies of the people of these United States and enemies of the state. By expressing allegiance to communism, whether by name or not, and a willingness and intention to act on such beliefs is in itself an act of terror and an open rebellion against our people, our society, and our government. For communism is not and never has been a legitimate political ideology. It has never sought to persuade. It has never sought to do good. It has only been a means by which the enemies of the people of the United States and their government, whether foreign or domestic, can bring about intentional, systematic destruction of their host nation. It is a revolution, communism, against the people of the United States and their government, brought about by foreign money, governments, organizations, companies, and banks, as well as domestic rebellious sources. Anyone who ascribes to the beliefs of communism, even if they call themselves a socialist or a Fabian socialist or they go by any other name, are hereby declared part of a domestic insurgency against the people of the United States and their government. For they are nothing more than the appendages of these various adversaries of the United States, both foreign and domestic, which would include, but are not limited to, certain banks, NGOs, foreign governments, companies, and so forth. If an individual or organization or company, or even a public gathering of people, is found to be in allegiance with communism, they are de facto a terrorist organization, and they are now in open rebellion and insurrection to the United States, and should be arrested, or if violence occurs in any way, when confronted, those in those things, in those places, should be unalived on the spot. Now, this law would only apply to communist revolutionaries and their allies. These would be the people inciting violence for the sake of taking out political obstacles, and those who are openly advocating for violence and celebrating it against their fellow citizens for the sake of advancing the communist revolutionary agenda of overthrowing the United States government, which is exactly what they're doing. And you think, people think that to themselves, they go, well, they're not trying to overthrow the United States government. They're just trying to, infiltrate it. Well, the United States government is founded upon the Constitution of the United States. If you are in open rebellion against the Constitution of the United States, you are in open rebellion against the government of the United States, period. Now, this would not apply to people who have a left-leaning type of view or belief about certain policies and certain things, that they would, wish to advocate for. It wouldn't apply to them. But it would not allow for anything that would be considered communist to be passed as a law, to be used as policy for, say, a presidential administration. For by that law, its own very nature, if it is communist, would be unconstitutional. I am advocating for a law such as this because the left has not backed off since Trump got elected. They've only doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down on their violent rhetoric and actions, just like they did in 2020. The communist color revolution of 2020 has not really stopped. It's only morphed into a full-scale civil war. They just have a little setback by not being in full political power. The new American Civil War has begun. But it will not be like the last Civil War in America's history. No. It'll be like the Spanish Civil War. It'll be like the Spanish Civil War where the Spaniards had to fight against the guerrilla communists, as some people refer to them as, using these guerrilla-type tactics, going from town to town and city to city, burning down churches, unaliving priests, burning down houses, businesses, and basically destroying everything and unaliving at random all over the place. Also, another thing, just as a reminder, I would be prepared for false flags against our side of the aisle. But definitely, I would be prepared for many more violent attacks and more things of what we saw happen in 2020 happen again. To be clear, I am not advocating for us to respond in violence to what has happened to Charlie Kirk, because that would be to our detriment. They want us to attack them openly and violently to make it look like that it was an unprovoked attack against them so they can put it on TV. Instead, we need a radical legislative response and a radical self-defense response. We need to ensure that they know that if they try anything stupid in our town, in our community, around us, with our families, at our events, at our churches, they try anything dumb, they try to come in there with their guerrilla warfare tactics that these freakos try to do, they need to know that there's going to be 18 barrels pointed in their direction before they can even bat an eye. They need to be keenly aware of this, by the way. So you kind of need to make them aware of it somehow. Sort of advertising that, anybody that is unauthorized to come in here will be detained, or maybe, something to the effect of, like if it's at a church service, maybe you have designated guards and they're the only ones to have weapons. There's strategies. So I would say get a concealed carry permit. Purchase what's needed for your home, for your neighborhood, for your community, for their defense, if necessary, if you can. For self-defense of your church, for your school. And if you see something that you know is wrong, point it out and scream about it. And if need be, fire first and ask questions later. Don't hesitate. Hesitation will only get them a move. I'm only speaking in terms of self-defense and not active combat, to be clear. To be clear, self-defense. Self-defense measures here, people. Do not give them any excuse to convincingly smear you as a terrorist in the media. Of course, the mainstream media will do so anyways, but most people will believe it's not true when they say it, if they can see with their own eyes that it's a clear self-defense. So, in conclusion, continue your prayers for Charlie Kirk's soul and his family and friends and co-workers and all those who knew him, and particularly pray for those who actually witnessed this horrendous event in person. You know, I was listening to a live stream of a live streamer that I like, and he makes videos too, and he had an interview with somebody who was there on the ground, and he's just totally traumatized. You know, it was somebody that he really looked up to, Charlie Kirk, and he was just horrendously, in the most gruesome and horrendous fashion, unalived in front of him. So pray for the people that were there on the scene when it happened. Pray for all of those who were affected by this horrible tragedy. Pray for everybody, because he was ripped away from all of us much, much too soon. So remember, people, the war of communist aggression, the war of communist insurgency has begun. Not by us, of course, but by the insurgents, the communist insurgents. This is truly America's turning point.